We're just preparing live stream. It says we are now being live stream on YouTube. So let me just mute myself on that screen. Oh, it's not letting me. Let's wait a little bit. Okay, there we go. It's happened to me a couple times that I hear myself double. And I didn't know why. Okay. There we go. Alrighty, so welcome everyone who is here in Zoom and those who are watching through YouTube and those who will watch in the future in the recordings. So we already started off with our icebreaker, and today you may not see another person with a camera on because I am actually going to be sharing my testimony today. I am going to be just talking a little bit about my personal testimony and how my relationship with God has grown over the years, as well as our city to country experience. And before we get started, though, I am going to begin with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for one new day of life that you gave us, and because we have one more evening to get together through Testimony Tuesday. And we ask that your Holy Spirit can be here with us, and that what I share may be inspiring to others. And I know that everyone has a testimony, and hopefully this will inspire others as well to grow their relationship with you. So once more, we ask for your presence to be here with us, and that you could also be with those who aren't able to make it today. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. Alrighty, so some of you may have been at the AFY meeting on Friday, and I shared a little bit about my testimony then, but today it's going to be in more detail. And so I'm opening up my notes. You see me with my phone, I'm trying to get my notes. So I have a little PowerPoint that I want to share with you guys. Again, if you were there on Friday, you would have already seen these photos. Let me see if I can share my screen really quick. Here we go. So I did explain this last time, but I was homeschooled, but I was online homeschooled. And so the teachers in the beginning of the semester would always do like this get to know me like slide thing, PowerPoint. And so I made one of me for those who may not know me or who haven't been here for like time to talk. And I put a few facts. So I am 21 years old, despite me looking 14 or 16, as I've been told. My favorite color is pink. I am the eldest daughter of, we are 3 in total. And you can actually see my siblings here in this picture. This is me, and then we have my little sister and my little brother over here. And then we have 2 really good friends, really close friends of ours. They're practically like siblings, so maybe the eldest of 5. And then Chinese food has always been my favorite, and I love baking and cooking. I put a little bread loaf here that I made once with my recipe. And then I also speak fluent Spanish and English, of course, and I am learning Mandarin. I started in high school, and I studied it for 2 years, and then I continued for a little bit and then kind of died off when I felt like I didn't have enough time. But now I do at least 5 to 10 minutes a day, and it really does help. So I'm gonna stop sharing real quick. And oh, I realized I didn't spotlight myself for YouTube. There we go. And so I guess I'll give you guys a little bit of background. I did grow up in an Adventist home, a Christian home. I wouldn't say that I had the closest relationship with God. We'd go to church every Sabbath. We would, I would have my Sabbath school lesson. I never once doubted that God wasn't real, but I definitely did. I've said this before, but it was sort of like I would read the Bible, I would read my Sabbath school lesson, yet it felt like I was more like getting to know God from like secondhand experience. So, when you want to meet someone, you talk to them directly. But if someone tells you about someone else, well, you know who they are, you know their name, but you don't actually know them personally until you spend that one-on-one time together. So that's sort of like what happened to me. I would read about God, I would see the miracles he would do, but I personally didn't apply those things to my life. And like I said, we did go to church every Sabbath, and my parents were heavily involved in church activities, or like busy directing them. Just always, whether it be with Sabbath school or with youth or with music, the sound system. My dad would help with that, so they were here and there and everywhere. And so it definitely get to the point where it was a bit much, but we'll probably cover that a little later. And so for me, I guess because I sort of grew up in that environment, I kind of grew up seeing church as like fun, or like a social situation type thing. I enjoyed the social activities more than the whole spiritual aspect of it. Even though I did believe in God, I still went more for the friends and for the activities and for all the stuff that was going on, Pathfinders and this and that. And if I did not get to go to, an event or something, I would get upset. And I would get upset at my parents, or I just would be like, oh, really wanted to go, and all my friends are going to be there, and I'm not going. And I would get really frustrated. And sometimes my grandma, out of the kindness of her heart, she would take me, just because I really, really wanted to go. And so I thank her for that. She was really nice in that. But yeah, it was just more like a social gathering for me. And I would prefer to spend a Sabbath afternoon with friends than with my family, which that shouldn't be the case. I mean, not that it's bad to have friends, but like it was just like every week. I would so much rather go to like, Vespers or something than to spend the afternoon with my family or something. Because I mean, in the end, it is a day to build to grow your relationship with God and your family. But for me, again, that was not the case. And so my parents raised us the best possible way they knew at the time. And as biblical truths began opening up to them, they began, applying them to our lives. And especially my mom, because she would read more, she'd listen to like more things and stuff. And so she would usually come to us and be like, oh, I learned this, or I heard about this. And so one of my favorite stories to tell is how we actually became vegetarians. And my parents were already vegetarians before I was born. And when my mom got pregnant with me, they figured that she needed more protein and more like nutrients. I don't know. They figured it would be healthier if they began eating meat again. And so that continued all the way up till I was about 11, 12. Um, and yeah, if you don't have a balanced vegetarian or vegan diet, then yeah, sometimes it's better to just not be it. But it's just about gaining that knowledge. But anyway, yeah, I was about 11 or 12. And so before then we had already stopped buying cow milk. And I don't know, probably 8 or 9, I guess, when we stopped. So we'd buy soy milk, almond milk. Soy milk was definitely not my favorite. Still not my favorite, but I do like the unsweetened almond milk from Costco. Some people say it tastes like nothing, but that's exactly why I like it. And so, we became vegetarian. At church, they talk a lot about the health message and about, what's healthy, what's not. They would even have health nuggets every Sabbath and stuff. And it's sad to say it's almost in vain, because people will listen and they'll hear that it's from like Spirit of Prophecy and the Bible, yet you don't really see it being applied. But like I said, in my parents' case, they had tried already before, and then they, we all would eat meat, and then my little brother came along, and then my little sister, and so we all ate meat, right? And when I was about 11, maybe a little younger, my brother was about 9, maybe. And he said one day, I guess because of all of the times that he would hear it being talked about, he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be vegetarian now." And so my mom kind of like was like, "Okay, all right, sure, but this is like a 9-year-old speaking, and she was like, "Okay, like, all right, whatever." And so, time went on. I don't know how much time, but then we ended up going to this restaurant called Food Records. And so they have a lot of like meat options there, not a lot of veg. I don't know about now, but at least at the time, there's a lot of meat stuff. And my brother would always get a hot dog there, and so my mom ordered him a hot dog, and he was like, "I told you I'm going to be vegetarian now." And she was like, "Oh, you're serious? Okay." And so she got the lettuce from, I guess, someone else's hamburger or something, or salad, I don't know, and put it in the hot dog buns, and that was his lunch, I guess. And so a few months after that, I guess he just became vegetarian after that. I don't know if that's when we started buying things like tofu and I don't know, things like that. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I was quite young. But as time went on, few months passed by, and we all still ate meat. It's just my brother was a vegetarian now. And so my sister, she was probably around 4 or 5, and we went to like this, never got on board with tofu. It's just how you prepare it. I was gonna come to that. But anyway, um, yeah, she was about 4 or 5, and we went to like this cookout with my aunt, and of course there was meat. I don't know what my brother ate, but there was meat. And I remember, we all ate meat, and the next day my sister threw up at church. And so in Spanish, chicken is called pollo or pollito, and she would call everything pollito, no matter if it was turkey or beef, whatever, it was pollito. And so she threw up, and she's like, "It was the pollito, it made me sick." And so she didn't eat. She decided that she wasn't going to eat meat anymore because it was going to make her sick. And so she became vegetarian at the age of 4 or 5 by her own choice. And now my little brother and my little sister were vegetarian. And so my mom was like, my kids are setting the example for me. So she ended up saying, "Okay, well, I'm going to be vegetarian too then." And so the months passed by, and I don't know how many of y'all have been to cattlemen's before, but essentially they sell, it's just pure meat, and the ribs were like a specialty for us. And so there was one close to, no, it was about an hour from our house actually. And they actually had like a petting zoo and stuff, and like a little park. And so we really liked going there. It was like a special treat. And they even had some historical stuff there. And we would go, and the ribs, like I said, were our favorite. My dad's favorite especially. And so in October is his birthday, and he's like, "In October, we're gonna go to Cattleman's for the last time, and then I'll be vegetarian." But just like a month or two before, we were talking about it for some reason, the becoming vegetarians, and I told my dad, "I'm not gonna be vegetarian until you're vegetarian." And apparently that kind of pressured him a bit, and he's like, "Well, I'm vegetarian now." And I was like, "No, you can't do that." I got upset because I loved my turkey bacon more than anything. I think that's why I didn't want to be vegetarian. I loved my turkey bacon. And so we ended up, after that, I had no choice. I mean, my dad became everyone was vegetarian except me. So I was like, "Well, I guess I'm going to be a vegetarian now." And we wouldn't eat pork, and so when we would go out to restaurants and stuff, it was always turkey bacon or like turkey options that we would buy. So after we became vegetarian, it took probably a year for us. We'd go to a restaurant, we'd sit down, and we'd look at the menu, and then something would have like bacon in it, and I would tell my mom, "Oh, actually this has bacon." And she'd say, "Well, just order the turkey, like, you can have the turkey." And I'd be like, "No, like, we're vegetarian now, we can't eat that." And she was like, oh yeah, and that would happen every single time we would go to a restaurant. So finally we got used to it. But anyway, yeah, that's how we became vegetarian. I guess it all kind of started with my little brother. And I feel like we might have eventually taken that step anyway, but I don't know, God has his ways, right, of working with people. And unfortunately, like I said, uh, the health message and stuff is talked a lot about at church, but you don't see it as applied as much. And so when we became vegetarian, we actually got a lot of criticism for it. And then, you know, it was just, I mean, it's kind of sad, right? Because, I mean, these are our brothers and sisters, but we did get criticism for it. And it was around that time, you know, that I was 11, 12, probably like 10, 11, actually. My parents started looking for, they became impressed with the whole country living, you know, thing. Like they just felt impressed, like, okay, you know what, it's time and to move. And the thing is, the place that we were at, it had a really big house, and we had our pool and our deck, and there was like a 2-story shed and everything. But it wasn't that way because we bought it that way. My dad, you know, it's not like we were rich or anything, but my dad is really handy. And so if, you know, my mom wanted a walk-in closet, he made her a walk-in closet. We wanted a deck for the pool, he made a deck for the pool. You know, he wanted a big shed, he made a big shed. And it took the course of the whole time since they bought that property until we sold it. And even then, he didn't finish everything he had. You know, it was a slow process. You know, as we could, he would buy the material and build and stuff. And it was just my dad and my mom. And so we had a pretty big place, but my dad was investing in that house because he thought he was going to retire there. And it was a really hard decision for him and my mom to say, you know what, I think God is calling us to get out of the city. And at the time, we lived in El Paso, Texas, and the city was nowhere near as big as it is now. It was like this, we were like in the suburbs. Not anymore. I don't think you could. I mean, maybe you could still call it that. You know, we've gone to visit a couple times because we have family in El Paso, and it's huge now. Give me a second. Gotta drink water. But yeah, we began. Well, my parents began praying. You know, I remember, again, I was pretty young, 11, 12, and I don't remember being like upset by it, because I know a lot of kids are like, no, like all my friends are here or whatever. I don't remember being upset at all by it, but I also don't remember being like, oh yeah, like country living and stuff. I just remember, I guess I saw it like an adventure, like something new. And, you know, several times we would find properties and we'd go visit them. And I guess I would get pretty excited, you know, once we were like on those pieces of land, because I was like, oh, like, you know, like the whole starting over didn't seem so daunting to me. It was like something I actually, I guess, enjoyed going to like see different places and stuff. And like I said, though, like the whole spiritual thing with me wasn't so, I wasn't so spiritually close. Well, I wasn't close with God. My spiritual life was not good. And I was, even though I was homeschooled, there was a lot of, because it was online homeschooled, you still get to interact with the teacher and other students through live meetings. You get to message them through like the webmail that they have like as a part of the school. And you don't escape the negative influences. And so for me, probably around age 13, I started like making friends and stuff, nothing necessarily bad. But then as I got older, I definitely started meeting more people that were not good influences. And among those people, there was this one guy that I liked and eventually dated for a while. And you know, it was just I'm trying to figure out how to explain it, but you know, for me, I guess something I want to get across is people can definitely become, you know, Satan can definitely use people to distract you from your spiritual life. And that was my problem, at least, because I am extroverted. I love socializing. I love being around people. And because I was homeschooled, you know, it's just my family. But instead of becoming closer to my family, I was actually drawn away from them because of these influences. And this guy specifically, you know, I said this during the Friday meeting, 13, 14, 15. So if you're in the teens, I don't recommend dating because you still have so much life to live. I'm going to do a short intermission here and talk about this for a little bit. You still are going to meet more people. You still are going to experience new things. And now you're getting emotionally attached to someone that could have been your friend, for a longer time. You have a good time with this person, you have things in common, you enjoy talking to them. And now if you date them and you end up breaking up, you potentially lost someone that could have been a good friend of yours. And so my dad would talk to me about this. And again, all of this was happening while we were in the process of finding a property and moving. So I guess that was part of the reason my parents felt the urgency, because they saw me becoming influenced by other people. And even in church, I hate to say this, but even in church, the influences were so bad. And it's kind of even worse when they're influences from church, because oh, well, my friend is starting to do this and she goes to church, so I guess it's okay. Or my friends are starting to talk this way and say these things. I guess it's okay if I do too. I mean, they go to church. So it's even more confusing, I feel like. And so for me, I was not only getting bad influences from the church, I was also getting bad influences from, my secular friends. And so around this time also, I remember at 12 I felt I was about 12 years old. I was like on my bed and studying my Sabbath school lesson, and I remember it was like 5 minutes. And I prayed my 30-second prayer, like, God, thank you for this day, blah blah blah, amen. And I was like, oh, that was, I felt like that was the first time the Holy Spirit was telling me, like, hey, you need to spend a little bit more time with me. And so I think at age 12, I started the struggle between peer pressure, church, my parents, this guy I liked, and eventually started dating. And then, the spiritual, it was just a whole mix. And I mean, especially in your teenage years, you're definitely very confused. And so my parents always did the best they could to like talk to me and stuff, but I have a very strong character. Like personality, I guess. I don't know how to explain it, but I would get really snappy. I wouldn't be scared to talk back. I would, just completely rebel against what my parents would tell me. And I remember always listening to what my parents would say and believing it, but also not wanting to do it. So they'd be like, when it came to the relationship, my dad would always tell me this and that. And my dad has always been the type, like, he won't say, no, don't do this, unless it's something like very, very, that he thinks is very, very like horrible that he wouldn't want me to do. But so like with the relationship that I later was in at age 17, he let me because he felt like I would be mature enough to handle it, but I definitely was not. And so I did struggle all this time. And at age 7, my great grandma died, and she lived with my grandma. And so we had our house, and then behind the house was the mobile home. And my grandma lived in that mobile home. That was my grandma's mobile home. And my great grandma lived there until she passed away. And so at age 7, I went to my grandma and I told her, like, do you want me to sleep with you? Because like, I don't, so she wouldn't be lonely. And from age 7 till just a couple years ago, till I got my own room, I slept with my grandma. And so she would always read my Sabbath school lesson with me, or at least try to read the Sabbath school lesson with me. She would always make, help me memorize the memory verses and Psalms and the 10 Commandments. And so she has like this zealousy. She's zealous for her, the spiritual things, for God things. And so I feel like she kind of rubbed that off onto me. And even though throughout all those years I was struggling with the bad influences and stuff, I was never afraid to mention God. And if anyone mentioned something against the Bible or against Jesus or whatever, I was ready to defend my point. Like, no, like, God's real. So I never was like, oh, I don't want anything to do with God. So I was always ready to, like I said, like, you defend God. But but I personally didn't have the greatest relationship. And so it was about age 16, 17 that I began kind of, by then we already moved out. I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. I'll come back to that. Around 16, 17, we had already definitely moved out by then. And that's when I started feeling the imminence of Jesus' return. I started seeing things happen, and I was like, Jesus is coming soon, and I am definitely not ready. And I started looking for God partially out of fear. And I don't recommend anyone to just be scared of God, obviously. But I wasn't so much scared of God. I was just scared of the judgment that would come, because I knew what was going to happen to, those who were lost. And so I was like, I don't want to be a part of that group. And so I started spending more time with God. I started having longer devotional times. But as I started doing that, I started, I guess you could say, falling in love with God. And I was like, wow, like I started applying things to my own life, because I already passed through so many things during my teenage years, and so many struggles, and so many like clashes with my parents, not because of them, but because of me, that I guess I found that refuge in God, and I started praying longer, and I was excited. After lunch, we would always have something called quiet time. And so that's what, 10-15 minutes of just, you can pray, you can go sing hymns, play an instrument, hymns and things like that. Just read, the Bible or something. And my mom started this when we were about 13. And I began having longer quiet times, and I began having longer prayers. And I started feeling God's love for me. And that's when I was like, wow, like, this is awesome. This is great. And that went on for a while until I began that relationship with this guy. And he wasn't a bad guy. I want to say he was a bad guy, but he definitely was a distraction. And so when you're 17, 18, 19, 20, you're in school, you're in a relationship, if you're in a relationship, you have your friends, you have your hobbies. At that age, it's easy to replace your relationship, the person that you're in, instead of God, you put that relationship in God's place sometimes. And that's what happened to me. And so I started spending a lot of time with this guy and less time in my devotional life and stuff, and my prayer life and all this. And that eventually I had to end that relationship because of it. And again, like I said, it wasn't the time. It's not that he was a bad person, but there's more to your life than when you're 17, 18, 19, 20. God has plans, and sometimes people can get in the way of those plans if you let them. And so I ended up leaving him 2 years later. He's a very close friend of mine, and that's what I mean. I ended up losing my really close friend because I was in a relationship with him. And so again, just a warning to you all. God has different plans for everyone, but for the most part, when you're very young, you don't want to just say, oh, this is it. This is a person I want to marry, when your brain is still not even fully developed. And that brings me to the next point, which is I started studying for elementary education because I just felt like, oh, this is, I have to study. I have to study something. Everyone goes to school. I have to go to school too. And I studied elementary education for a couple years until I was like, you know what? I don't think this is what God has planned for me. After a lot of prayer, I ended up getting out of that university. I did it online. And also, by the way, after I left that guy at age 19, I started a relationship so close with my family that now my family is like number one. And that is what you need to get to. Your relationship should never be over your own family until you're married. So if you see that happening, big red flag. But anyway, yeah, I started becoming really close to my parents, to my siblings, when before I wasn't paying any attention to them. And so it was, I was able to talk to my parents about these decisions and stuff. And so I was like, you know what? I don't think this is the way I'm supposed to go for, studying. And so my mom has always been into like health and nutrition and all this. And she actually wanted to be a nutritionist when she was younger, but she didn't get that opportunity yet. She still would, learn and listen and read. And she'd always tell us, at the table, like, oh, like today I learned this or today I learned that. So I was always exposed to that. But I was never like, oh, health, yay, that wasn't like my thing. That was my mom's thing. But for some reason, I was like, well, I guess maybe out of my mom's influence, I should take a medical missionary course. And so I was looking into different schools, and we do have a farm here. And it's a small farm, but it's one person cannot handle it. And so I would help my mom a lot because my siblings were still studying, my dad would work. So I was really the only one who could help my mom. And I was like, I don't want to leave for months to take a medical missionary course, but I do want to take one. And thankfully, my mom actually found the Wildwood Center for Health Evangelism, or Institute for, I forgot, Wildwood Center, I think it is, for Health Evangelism. And they have an online course. And I thought that was great because it gives people like me the opportunity to study. And I took it. And for anyone interested, they do have if you want to take it online, they do have an intensive week on campus for the hydrotherapy and massage theory. Well, they actually teach you the massage part. And so I thought that was really cool. But thankfully, my cousin that was both a student and a volunteer or staff member at an institute, she now lives like 7 minutes away from us. So she taught us hydrotherapy. She taught me massage. And so I didn't have to go. But for those who do want to go, Wildwood is really great. I love their courses. I highly recommend them to anyone who's thinking about Wildwood Health Institute. Yeah, they have that course, and I highly recommend to anyone who is looking for a medical missionary course. And their course is just so packed of things, and that's something that I want to when you take a medical missionary course, not all of them have them, some don't, but most, I think, medical missionary courses, it isn't just health and this is how, what you can eat, this is what you can't. It goes into anatomy and physiology. It goes like I said, into massage. It goes into hydrotherapy. It even goes into prophecy, biblical counseling. It has so many other branches that one doesn't really associate with medical missionary work. And so after I finished that course, I was sad I finished it because I loved every video and every book and everything that that comes included in that course. But I was also so excited because I was like, wow, I never thought I would love medical missionary work. It was definitely not like up here, like at the top of my head, like, oh, I want to become a medical missionary. And after that, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to dedicate myself to ministry. And so what I tell people is that I highly recommend you, before you take any college or university course, take a medical missionary course. Some people take a gap year anyway. At least do something like this, because it might open your eyes to something you never would have thought of before. Maybe you never thought of becoming a massage therapist, and after your medical missionary course, you're like, wow, I love this. I want to become a massage therapist or a biblical counselor, or even a pastor or something, because they cover just a whole wide variety of stuff. And so I highly, highly recommend, if you're finishing high school, take a medical missionary course, because it will open your eyes to a whole world of things you might have never thought of. And not only can you make money off of something, make a living off of like becoming a massage therapist, you can also do ministry while you're doing it. And so that's a lot of, at that age, 17, 18, ministry isn't necessarily the first thing, on your list. But when you take, like, that's why I feel like a lot of people choose things like, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a teacher, which you can do ministry through all of those. But what I'm saying is that they don't have a ministry or mission like mindset. And so this kind of opens your mind to that world and can even get you excited about it. And that's just like with relationships. I recommend don't choose a career until you've exposed yourself to mission work, because you might, just like with a relationship, well, it's because I like this person. You might even think you love this person. I want to spend the rest of my life. Again, you're only 17, 18. First of all, what's the rush? Second of all, again, your brain isn't even fully developed yet. It's not till like 25 or 30. So if you're not ready to make a decision of the person you want to spend the rest of your life with, but it's the same thing with your career. You haven't maybe you haven't exposed yourself to this, and you just want to say, no, it's because I want to be a teacher. I want to be a teacher. And you limit yourself to what God could use you in. And so that's why I say be open, be, ready to listen. So in this year, early this year, my mom actually took the med missionary course. I don't know how many of you all have heard of it, but it is a course. It's 6 weeks, also online, and they have a Zoom meeting every Sunday, and they give you like different videos to watch, and you do have like your tests at the end to get your certificate and stuff. But it has a focus on autoimmune disorders, which most things stem from autoimmune anyway. And so if you feel like, oh, it's because I don't have a whole year or whatever, take that course. It is a great way to begin your medical missionary journey. And they're actually going to have a conference in 2 weeks, I think. And so if you're able to, I think, yes, it's the 23rd. I highly recommend you go to something like that, because then you kind of expose yourself to the work of medical missionaries. And so my mom took that course, and we ended up applying that to our own lives. And we did the protocol, because it comes with a protocol. And you're like, oh, I don't have autoimmune, like I'm good. Guys, at age 17, I started with 17, 18, I started with extreme fatigue. I had to take a nap every day. I started with really bad burning back pain, leg pain, dizziness, headaches every single day. I couldn't keep, like, my food felt like I was just going to throw up after every meal. It was horrible. And I went to the doctor a couple times. I even got x-rays, and I was perfectly healthy. After we did this course, or not this course, well, my mom did the course, but then we did the protocol on it. Everything went away. Everything, with some things in like that same week, some things in 2 weeks, some things at the end of 2 months, it was completely gone, like the pain. But it was incredible. And now I'm like so excited to share this with other people. It's friendship evangelism. Medical missionary work is friendship evangelism. And Ellen G. White even talks about how it's going to be the last work standing, because people might not want you to be preaching and like telling them, shoving doctrine down their throat. But if they're hurting, they will let you into their own home. And this has happened to us multiple times, where we got an opportunity to talk to people about God because of medical missionary work. And I was seeing if I could bring up that quote real quick. It says, where is it? Yeah, I wish to tell you that soon there will be no work done in ministerial lines, but medical missionary work. That's in Christian home. And so it's super important. And so that definitely helped me. And you can't become a medical missionary and not apply these things to your own life and expect other people to be converted because of it. I mean, these are principles you have to be applying to your life. And so, and we were vegetarians still, and we thought we were healthy, but it wasn't until we took that course that, we really felt healthy, and like brain fog was gone and everything. It was like a miracle. But anyway, going back to before we moved, that's a little bit of my testimony, my own personal testimony, that what happened, that was all going on and happened before we moved, during we moved, and while now that we're here. But when we were making the decision to move, again, I was pretty, like, not like, woo, like super excited, but I would definitely get excited at the thought. And so we didn't want to be too far from our family in El Paso, because both my mom and my dad had family there. And so we were looking at places around, and we found this one place. Well, it's where actually we live now. It's a small town and very small. If you look up the name, the census sometimes says 0, sometimes 30, sometimes 50 people. It's not true, there's more, but there were two properties here that, oh, and the reason why we started looking here is because we found a church only half an hour away from this little town, and we were like, whoa, there's a church in the middle of nowhere. It's a small little church, but it was really nice because we are like, whoa, there's an Adventist church in the middle of nowhere. And so we started looking around that area, and then we found this little town, and there was two properties. One was a little bit farther in, and then there was the one we are on now. And so my parents had been praying for years at this point for God to show them where we were to move. They felt like, okay, we have to make the decision now. And they ended up praying that night and saying the next day they were going to decide. They're like, God, between these two properties, where do you want us to settle at? And the next day they went, and the other property was completely off. Like, it didn't say off market, it didn't say sold, it didn't say pending, it just wasn't there. And so that was like, I guess like on Realtor or something, and they were like, oh, maybe it's just Realtor, let's check other places. No, they couldn't find it anywhere. It was like completely off the face of the earth. And so they obviously were like, okay, this must be the place God wants us to be at. And so, they were, obviously that was a miracle, because then sometime later that property came back on the market. It just disappeared and came back for no reason. And so, we saw that as an answered prayer. And so, yeah, my parents ended up buying this place. It is 12 acres. It has its own well. It had the electric pole and everything here for, what was it? 29,000, 26,000. Something along the lines, but it was definitely cheap. The well itself would cost that much. And it's a really good well. And we were like, wow, 12 acres is, but it did not have a house. It has a little camper that's still there on the property, really like not usable. And it had like this adobe like thing, but that was it. It had no house. And so we ended up buying this property at that price, I believe with no interest. And then later on, we found out that other neighbors, here had wanted to buy this property, and they kept denying, like, and this was like either the same year or a couple years before we bought it. They were denied. The lady didn't want their offers. And for us, we got it cheaper than she was asking for, and also with no interest, and it was just like a deal. And she said yes. And so we bought this property. We ended up bringing my grandma's mobile home, and I was the first couple summers we lived in an RV. And it was just during the summer, because there's no way you could survive a winter here in an RV unless it's like really, you have the heating and everything in there. And so really good heating system. And so we ended up bringing my grandma's mobile home here in the spring. And we ended up moving here officially. We ended up selling our place in October of 2018, and we ended up moving here. Like, we had already, my mom, my siblings, and I, my grandma had all moved here. My dad had to stay in El Paso a couple times to finish working on the house and stuff. But eventually, yeah, by 2018 October, we were all here and we were settled. And I was 16 years old. But again, I was like 13 when we started. And it was at age 13 that I, in El Paso, I would never help. My dad and my mom were always building, making the house bigger and better, but I never would help. And it was super hot sometimes. I wouldn't even go to offer them water or anything. And, I feel so bad about that now. But I guess when we moved out here, I knew I was kind of going downhill, because I already started with the influences and the bad influences and stuff. And I was like, I need to start changing. I need to help more. And I remember the first day that we got here, or one of the times that we ended up coming, we had a bunch of T-posts in the back of the truck. And so I try to motivate my siblings. I was like, all right, come on, let's do this for mom and dad. And so I'd get them all excited, everything. And I guess that was the beginning of my growth. It was little bits in here every year. I would try to improve, or I would improve in some things, and I'd still fail, but I'd come back up, and until I got to the point that I'm now. That am I perfect? No, but I can at least say that I see God real in my life. And one of the things that my parents loved about the church that we moved to, that we have now, there's the town where it's located is called Pie Town, and it is really, it's known for its pies. It used to be known for its pies. Now they're not as good as they used to be, but there's like 2, 3 pie places there, and they they I guess there's actually a Mormon church, and it ended up being given to a lady that lives there. And so we ended up moving the church. The Mormon church is like on the corner of where you turn to go to our church. And so they ended up moving the whole building from the corner to, like, there's a community center, and then there's the Adventist church. So that's what ended up happening. And it was, I don't know how that happened. That happened years before we moved there. But that church is just so, the people are so genuine. They're so nice. And I always tell people there's no church like Pie Town. You will not find a church like Pie Town, just because it's so, there's not like hundreds of members. So you're like really close to everyone, and everyone cares about each other. And most, not, of course, everyone's not going to be 100% in agreement with everyone always. But for the most part, there's no like arguments, there's no discussions. It's just, I mean, I don't even think there's ever been anything like huge go on there, but it's just so nice. And my parents, like I mentioned earlier, were super involved in like the youth and the music and like everything. And they felt like it was too much. It was actually drawing away, even though it was church activities, it was drawing them away from their time with God. And so here it was the complete opposite. We could actually rest on Sabbath. We could actually like being in communion with God and our brothers and sisters. And it was just this peace. And when you are in the city, even if you go outside and sit a chair out, it's not the same as when you're out here, because you set the chair out and you see the mountains and you hear the birds and you see, all the scenery. And it's just a peace really that you can't experience in the city. And since then, in February, it was about, I think, 3 years ago, I think, is when Some Flores Farm was actually birthed. We had already started. One of the goals was to become self-sufficient, and so we started our gardens. It turned into a little farm. We would always call it the garden until someone was like, that is not a garden, that is a farm. And so we're like, okay, I guess it's a farm. And every year would grow like an acre of pinto beans, and we have like just the corn and the pumpkins, and of course the flowers and the herbs, and just a little bit of everything, tomatoes, squash, and onions and garlic. And so that we were like, okay, we're a farm. But we had a couple of people ask us like, okay, well, what's your name, or like, what are you guys called? And so we had thought about this for like a year, and we didn't know. We were like between Villa de los Flores, because my mom's maiden name is Villalobos, and my dad's is Flores. So we were like Villa de los Flores or stuff like that. And then we get a lot of sunflowers. We grew them one year, and now they grow like weeds. And so, I mean, they're beautiful, but they literally grow everywhere. And so my dad was just sitting at the table one day. He looked up and he was like, what about Some Flores Farm? And at first I thought it was silly. I was like, no, like that. I didn't even think of that as an option until we kept repeating it. And I was like, I guess it's not that bad. It's a fun play on words. And so, because instead of sunflower, it's Some Flores, because Flores is flower. And we ended up calling it that. And a friend of ours actually designed the logo. Very kind of him. And I began uploading. My sister would write poems, and we'd upload them on the Sabbath, poems of nature, of God. And then I would write poems sometimes or just thoughts. We have health nuggets on there. We have a couple of farm things. We have videos on our YouTube channel. And of course, we post all that on our social media. And this year, we opened up our online store, online market, as we call it. And I was going to talk a little bit about the market. My brother didn't know he liked farming or agriculture until we moved out here. And once we were out here, he started with his little plot of land. You know, my parents gave him this like, you know, okay, well, you can grow there. And so, you know, that's been expanding pretty much every year. And then he's bought his own greenhouse. And so he really likes it. And his dream is to just be able to have a big farm one day. And he wanted to sell his produce because he would grow stuff. We tried one year in a town close by. It was okay. Definitely not worth our time though. I wanted to have a bakery since I was 7, and I've always liked baking, like I said. So I would bake and stuff, vegan and all these things. And the next year we were like, we can't do that. Oh, and plus they changed the day from, I think it was like Thursdays to Saturdays. And so we were like, we can't do that. So we decided to start our own little market here in our town. Even though there's no official farmers market, we started calling it the Daddle Mini Market because that's what our town is called, Daddle. And the Daddle Mini Market, and that's what we're known as now. And so we started off with 1 table, then 2. I remember one time we counted 7 tables just of stuff we make. And so it'll be baked goods. My grandma makes purses. I make salves and soaps. My brother, of course, all his produce. My mom grows things too. My sister wood burns, so she will make wood burn gourd, you know, birdhouses. And I make keychains too. So it's just, and my sister also makes cards. She's an artist, so she'll design cards and things like that. So we ended up filling all these tables, and in the spring we'll sell starts and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely something that we wanted to continue, but we can't in the winter because we're literally out in the elements. We've had times where we've been rained on and the wind has been horrible. There was this one time the rain was so hard and we were all drenched and the bread was all mushy and people would still bought it. I guess they felt bad for us. People would stop and they'd buy. And so yeah, it was definitely and it's been an experience. But we don't just sell. We have a table with literature. But every time I sell something and they have a bag, I always fill the bag, or not fill, but every time we set up, I have we have the plastic bags and we have the paper bags. And so in the paper bags, I always put in a glow track, you know, signs of the times or something. And we will just, you know, I'll give it to them like that. So every time, or we'll always offer, and we have gotten so many people that have asked us, oh, what denomination are you? And we'll get to talk about it. Or I'll mention medical missionary course and they'll start talking to me about it. Or there's this one guy who had already heard of the Adventists and is almost vegetarian. He says he still eats some meat, but he tries to be as healthy as he can be because of the Adventists. He's not Adventist, he's actually Catholic, but he really admires the Adventists because of that. So it's like medical missionary work is in the blood of the Adventists. It's something that we have to keep alive, and it's really important. And so now we have our online web store, and we are that opened a couple months ago. So we have stuff on there if you guys are interested. It's actually, I'll type it in the chat, www.sunfloresfarm.com/market. And then for Med Missionary, I think it's just medmissionary.com, the one that I mentioned earlier. And then you could just look up Wildwood. Med Missionary also has their Facebook page and stuff, so you can look up the camp. Let me see if I can find Med Missionary. I'm seeing if I could send you guys the camp information, the camp meeting. Yes, so medmissionary.camp, medmissionary.camp. So that is the information you can find all that on. And so yeah, now we're fully dedicated to ministry, and people will ask me sometimes, like, what are you doing, you know, in like, are you studying or what are you doing? And I get a lot of negative comments sometimes, or sometimes people are like, that's great. I mean, you have both ends. Some people are like, oh, school nowadays is so bad anyway. This is so much better. But then there are going to be people who will criticize, or who will be like, well, like, you should be, studying or doing something with your life. And for me, again, I never imagined I would be dedicating myself solely to ministry. I'm open to God's calling if he wants me to study or not. I'm still praying about it, but right now I'm fully satisfied. And you will, sometimes you might think you have this plan for your life. I definitely did. People would ask me, I'd give them the whole list. I'm going to do this, I'm going to study this, and then do this, and blah, blah, blah. And they'd be like, wow, you really got it all figured out, huh? They probably knew it wasn't going to happen, right? But I was like, yeah. I was like super proud of that when people would say that. And now it's like nothing that was on my list. I didn't end up studying. I didn't end up moving. I didn't like end up doing anything that was on my list. And I am happier than ever. And so when you're doing God's will, you might think you know what you want to study. You might think you know who you're going to marry. You might think you have this plan laid out for you. But you have to be open to God's will, because you will be so much happier doing that. It's going to be so much more rewarding. And so that is, I guess, one can go on and on. There's so many stories to tell. I guess I'll just tell you guys a couple stories from when we were moving. We would always get a flat tire it's about a 4-hour drive from El Paso to where we're at. And every single time we would get a flat tire. And maybe a couple times we didn't, but it was very rare when we didn't. And so we were always scared. And one time we got a flat tire. Was it one or two? I think it was 2 flat tires. We went in 2 separate. Well, I was in the truck with my siblings and our cousin and my grandma. And I think my mom was in the van, or something like that. And we were passing through a cow farm thing. I don't know what you call it. But there was a lot of cows, I guess. I don't know if it was for meat or for milk, but they had all of these cows. And it was so hot. There was no air conditioning in the truck. And there were so many flies, hundreds of flies. It smelled so bad. And we ended up, as we were driving through that area, 2 of the tires popped of the truck. And of course, my dad went to the side of the road. And well, we ended up, we opened the doors, obviously, so my dad could get out and stuff. And so he and my mom ended up going to get, I guess, new tires or something, and into town, which was like, we weren't super close. We weren't super far either, but I don't remember exactly how far it was, but it was definitely not really close. And so they ended up going with a van. And there we were, myself, my grandma, and my siblings and my cousin. I think my grandma was there. I might be lying, but we were all in there, and the flies and the smell and the heat, it was horrible. And yeah, all we could do was laugh, because it was such a crazy situation to be in. And we did not have fly swatters or anything, so we had like these magazines in there. We started trying to kill flies, and it was disgusting, but it was definitely an adventure. There was another time that we had come, and we had all come in the van, only in the van. And I had a test the next day. Even though I was homeschooled, we had to do like the state tests in person, and we had to test the next day. And so we were about to leave. We had just come to visit the property, but we had to go back to El Paso because of that. And we were all ready to leave. And we were like, where are the keys? The keys for the van. And we were looking and looking, and we could not find it. I don't know how long, but it was definitely a long time. The sun was setting, and my dad was like, well, why don't we just stay, here? And maybe we could have, but it was the test the next day, and I had to. It was a state test. I couldn't do it over, and we didn't have signal yet here, I think. So it was like, it was an urgent situation. And my dad had even started opening up the van to see if he could start it, without the keys. And oh, it was horrible. And of course, we had all prayed and prayed, God, where are the keys? Where are the keys? Why don't you answer? And in one of those, my mom closed her eyes, prayed, turned around, and they were right there, hidden in a little pile of, I don't remember if it was a little bush or like the grass, because the grass here grows in like pieces. It's not like all over. It's like it grows in little like bushel. I don't know what you would call it. And the keys were like right there. We had looked everywhere, literally everywhere. Yet I don't know. God did that. It was a bush. She said, okay, yeah, it was a bush. And so we had looked everywhere, all of us. It was like what, 5 of us, and if my grandma was there, it was 6 of us. Yet it wasn't until my mom prayed and turned around that it was there. And there's just so many stories to tell. There was another time also a tire popped, and oh man, it was the heat and everything. But maybe one day we'll just have a time where we share stories. But it was an experience. Yet every time, it helps build character. Here it's Joseph. I like it when those kinds of situations happen. You just got to chin up and find joy in the absurdity of things. Yes, that is true. And some people tell us, well, you can't go hide, in the mountains all your life. And we're like, no, we're not hiding. We didn't come to become hermits and do nothing. We're not hiding. We came to build character. And I'm so glad my parents took us out of the city in time, because I don't know where I'd be if we would have stayed there. Definitely not in ministry, that's for sure. And again, there's so many stories, so many miracle stories that have happened while we've lived here. One time, that Adobe thing, it was stuffed with like carpets and stuff. I don't know, the guy who made it stuffed it, I guess, for insulation. My dad ended up setting it on fire one time, and the well still wasn't on. We ended up having to use water bottles to turn it off. It was crazy. But yeah, there's so many stories, and it's just builds character. When you're growing your own food, when you're working, my dad, now works as a handyman. When he worked as a programmer for like 16 years of his life, now he's doing handiwork, because he already knew how. Like I said, he built our house and everything. And here too, we came in the mobile home, and now we built our house, and still not done, but it's in the process. And so it's definitely been a blessing. And now I don't want to move anywhere else. People tell me, don't you want to go back to El Paso or move? And I'm like, no, I love it here. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And so now our goal is to open up a lifestyle center, have guests come, and we can give them treatments, feed them well, show them what it is to do country living, show them the farm. So that's the goal, and we are praying about it, and just seeing how God opens the doors for that. So now I'll give the time for anyone to ask any questions in the chat. And meanwhile, I'll show you guys some pictures that I have ready. Let's see. If you have a question, you could go ahead and send it, or you can send it to me directly if you don't want to put it in the chat, the big chat, the public. So this was our house.
Yeah, I got a question for you.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for sharing your testimonies. Praise God for what you guys are doing there. So, when you took the medical missionary course at Wildwood, was there any subject that stood out the most out of all the other subjects, like that became your favorite? And also, upon finishing that program, the medical missionary program, did you get the opportunity to share what you learned there to like your communities or like local churches, that type of thing?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I definitely was always into like psychology, but I know that secular psychology has a lot of weird stuff in it. So I was really excited to find out they had biblical psychology. And so I definitely have thought about that as a career. It's just, again, just praying about what God wants, what the next chapter of my life is going to look like. but I really liked the biblical psychology. And I remember that the prophetic studies and there's another one. But just generally like the whole like lifestyle, anatomy and physiology, I was just astonished by like all the information of like how the body works. But yeah, I really got into prophecy after that, I think. And so as part of the course, you have to like you have to share can you okay, I know you guys can see my screen, but I wonder if you can see my screen on YouTube. If not, I'm gonna, that way I can just, let me see. Turn my camera back on. Yeah, you can see it. Okay. As a part of the courses, some of them require you to share. And for example, for there's one where they're teaching you how to be a good speaker. So how to present, how to make a good PowerPoint. And they give you a form, and someone from church there's like two people have to sign it. They have to be part of the church board or something like that. I think they have to be a part of the church board, and they have to sign it, and they have to like analyze how you presented it, so it has different like points and stuff like that. And so you have to do that twice. And then another thing you have to do is for the cooking class, the vegetarian cooking class, you actually have to give a cooking class, and you have to write what you what you talked about, what benefits and what food and stuff like that. And then, so it's not just like online work and stuff, but you have to like submit things like that. You have to get signatures sometimes. And so after I did that one cooking course, I saw such a good results that I ended up doing it once a month. I don't actually remember. Once a month. I think it was once a month, if I remember correctly. And so I actually got several people come. We had like a full or like dining room, and I would give the cooking classes, and I really enjoyed that. So I started doing that. Yeah, one time a month. And so yeah, that's what I ended up doing. And so yeah, I definitely got the opportunity to share with others. And I think that's kind of what started that love for ministry, because I started as a part of the course, you have to share, and so you get the results and you're like, wow, this is great. And so yeah, that's how that went for me. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. That answered it.
Yes, thank you for your question. If anyone else wants to ask, feel free to. Meanwhile, I was going to show you guys these pictures. This was the house that we had in El Paso. Over here, oops, you can see the house outside. It did not look like this. It was like falling apart when my dad bought it. He ended up making the ceiling higher, the balcony, painting everything from the outside, texturing it. It is just completely different. And then we have the living room over here. These are the pictures. We sold it. This isn't what it looked like, style wise, when we had it. The people who bought it made it look like this, and then they ended up selling it again. So I got these pictures off of Realtor. But I mean, the house is the same. Here was the living room, another shot of the living room over here, and you can see the dining room, the kitchen. Of course, my mom loved her kitchen. Look at all those counters and cabinets and everything. Over here, you can see this was a den, but I think they turned it into like an apartment. Because they closed it off. This part right here was not closed. It was open, and they had the staircase. This door leads to the staircase up, and the TV. And then this brown door was the room to my dad's office. And then over here was the bathroom, a big bathroom. This was one of the rooms, I think upstairs. I had surround sound and everything, so I did the den. Down here on the bottom left was the bathroom. It had a jacuzzi and everything. My dad had even put a little like monitor and then covered it with like, it wasn't glass, but it was like I don't know, it was like a plastic, but you could like mica or something like that. And that way we could watch things while we were in the jacuzzi. And then over here was my brother's room, and my aunt actually painted this. She is really talented. And my brother put these stickers that are right here. They're still there. And then now are some pictures of our life now. So cabbages. This is our cabbage patch. Calendula flowers. I make salves out of that. We have broccoli, spaghetti squash, tomato. We don't have the bees for the honey right now. We buy it from someone local, but we'd like to one day. You can see the green beans, roses, and over here you can see the harvest of pumpkins and stuff. Over here is the peppers that my brother grows and my mom too. Here are some giant cabbages that we didn't expect to grow that huge. And at the market, we tried selling them big like that and people wouldn't buy them. But then we cut them in half and then wrap them like that, you know, with like plastic wrap. And people would buy two halves. We just thought that was so funny. And then the corn got beets. They're pretty big. They're about like this big, probably. Carrots. This over here down on the bottom right is our carrots, the foliage. We have a lot of cucumbers. Oh, we got so many cucumbers and huge ones. We got like cucumbers this big. Even bigger, like this thick sometimes. And then we over here we got some canned pumpkin. We can a lot too. And then we got fruit this year. We had been praying for fruit. We got fruit one time, peaches, but we actually brought some of these trees from El Paso. We got blackberries, peaches, apples. We got some strawberries. My brother has a grapevine, so we got grapes. We got cantaloupes, kind of covered that one up a little bit. Melons. And then we got, I don't know how many of y'all have seen piña nuts or piñones. This was the year. They grow, I mean, there's some probably every year. I haven't really noticed, but every 3 to 4 years, there's like the big harvest. And normally it has to have snowed pretty good or like good moisture. And the next year, the trees will produce a lot. And so these come out of like the pine cones. There's pine cones, and then inside there's the nuts. And so over here on the bottom left, you can see my sister and I, someone actually gave those to us. You know, we pull down, they're like little rakes. Or one is a hook, and you pull down and then you pick up the little nuts, and you can sell a pound for like $30. No, if they're shelled. Unshelled, they're worth even more. So if you have them around your place, they're a good business. You can sell them on eBay or something. And of course, you know, we are some Flores farm, so I had to have sunflower pictures. And we have just a corn there that I wanted to show you guys. We got so much corn. I think we got like 200 something cobs this year. But yeah, that's a huge shed. And of course, I just want to end with some of the sunsets that you don't get anywhere else. I love the sunsets here, and almost always you get double rainbows. So I just wanted to show you guys there the double rainbows. And yeah, that is a little bit of my testimony. I know I went on for a while. But yeah, you know, we could just talk so much about God's blessings. And so I hope that was at least inspirational, you know, to in one way or another, and that you guys were blessed by it. Let me see if anyone has any opinion. Yeah, being so in Spanish, like, okay, let me see how to spell it, because I know there's different ways. Because you can look them up as pine nuts and they'll come up, because there's just so many different ways to write it. So yeah, pine nuts, it'll come up. But yeah, I don't see any other questions. Yeah, pine nuts. So if no one has any questions, I'll go ahead and just end with a word of prayer. If you think of one, type it in the chat before we end it. I'll still answer. So I'll go ahead and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that we got to share and talk about some of the blessings that you have given us. And we ask that you could work in the lives of everyone that was able to listen here, and those who are making decisions for their life. And we ask that you can just help us grow closer to you, that you may send your Holy Spirit upon us, and that we can want to have that love and towards you and to our neighbors, our friends, our family, and even our enemies, and that we can just proclaim the good news of the gospel of your soon return, and that we could just be lights to those who are around us. We ask this in Jesus' name. Alrighty, guys. So I don't see any. Those are expensive. Yeah, the pine nuts are definitely expensive. So that's why I say if they're around where you're at, or you know a place, or a forest or something, go get them because they're worth a lot. Alrighty, I'm afraid to eat them just because then they taste like, I don't know how many of y'all has smelled sap, but that's what they taste like, the sap. So some people like it, some people might not, but you could just maybe get used to it. Alrighty, well, I'm gonna go ahead and end the YouTube live stream. And so thanks to all those who watched on YouTube, and we will catch you next week. Next week, we actually have, let me see, who's presenting next week? Oh, so next week we actually have Judith's husband. So Judith was already on here. She was actually, I think, the first one that shared testimony Tuesday. And her husband is actually going to be sharing next week his testimony. And, you know, included there is how they met as well, you know, in the same health institute and stuff. So it's a really nice story. And we hope to see you guys there. So don't miss out. And we will be having Time to Talk Tuesday, the 29th. So during Time to Talk Tuesday, don't get tongue-tied. It is a time for discussion. We get to talk about a topic that is voted for. And then at the end, we get a time to interact, to get to know each other better. That part is not recorded. This is just time to hang out. And yeah. So, and then November, we are going to be having a medical missionary spotlight. Is that next Tuesday? Next Tuesday is going to be Rafael, which is Judith's husband. And then the 29th, that's in 3 weeks. I'm just letting you guys know ahead of time. That is going to be Time to Talk Tuesday. Yeah, as I was saying, November is going to be medical missionary spotlight, and we're going to have different young medical missionaries sharing part of their testimony and how the medical missionary work has incorporated its way into their lives and the stories and just everything that comes with that. So I'm excited for that. Hopefully we'll see you guys for that. And we do have the webinar coming up in February where we have different speakers that are going to share about, again, medical missionary work, mental health, country living. It's going to be real good. So we want to see you guys there. Even some of the history of medical missionary work for those who don't know. So yeah, those are the announcements. So yeah, I hope we see you guys next week. We do have our group chat. So if you're interested, you can go ahead and message me and I could add you onto that. So, alrighty. Well, have a good evening, guys, and we will see you all next